Blindness is kind of interesting, right? It's out of all the disabilities, there's really not a lot of individuals who are completely, totally blind, actually, out there. Kind of fun fact. Very, very small percentage of the population. So when people think, oh man, we're working with someone who's blind, employers do this to me all the time. Oh, you're gonna, we're talking about hiring, like rehab services for the blind. The name's kind of misleading, right? I have some vision. I can see you guys a little bit. I was able to toss an eyeball to her earlier, so and she caught it way better than I would. So that's great. But there's such an amalgam of types of visual impairments out there, right? And right now, diabetic retinopathy, I'm struggling here, is one of the things we're seeing a lot, because we're seeing a lot of that type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people aren't really controlling it as well as they should. I mean, some are, of course, but with diabetic retinopathy, you can kind of control your vision loss a little bit through just proper control of your diabetes, right? So, but then you've got all sorts of, like Stargardt disease, kind of a rare disease, and a lot of times people don't know they have it, and then they start to experience vision loss. I've got 3 or 4 clients on my caseload, and one was a high voltage electrician, right? So he worked way up high on these big power lines you see going across the state, except he was in Nebraska. So, he had a vision loss kind of later in life. He's in his early 50s. And it's unfortunate because the work he was trained to do, right, was specialized. I think he made good money for his family, had good wages and that kind of thing. So now he's out of the job, right? And he's still experiencing some vision loss, but he's smart, he's intelligent. I mean, he can rewire your house, he can put lights up in this building, right? So someone like me comes out and we try to figure out what kind of work he can go back to, right? But that's kind of hard too, because his confidence is shaken right now. He doesn't know if he can go back to work, but he knows he wants to. So think of it like this, you have grandparents, and then you go to take the keys away from somebody because they really shouldn't be driving anymore. Your whole life, you're taught to be responsible, you're taught to lead, you're taught to be accountable and take care of all the things every day. And all of a sudden, someone takes that away from you when you're in your late 80s or your 90s. That's a hard deal, right? Well, just imagine, like, you have a visual impairment, all of a sudden something happens, you have eyesight loss. And all the things you could easily do before, like run to Starbucks and get coffee, you can't just do that for someone anymore, right? So it's challenging. And that's why we're here, to try to help bridge that gap, right? So, but anyway, do you guys have any quick questions, like before everybody else arrives, like just informal, like stuff you want to know? Don't be shy.
Can you tell us a little bit about rehab services for the blind, kind of how it started with the state, who's in charge of it, etc.? Kind of a history?
Yeah, absolutely. And Linda, I don't know, you know a lot about that, the kind of the beginnings of RSP, right? Yeah.
So my job is to help someone navigate kind of that transition from, they got to a point where they've adjusted and they're ready to either re-enter the workforce or kind of like Jeff was saying, some people are employed and the vision loss is starting to interfere with what they do. So like, for example, someone's a secretary and they need to be able to type, so maybe their production is going down, so they can reach out to us and we'll work with them and their employer to see what adjustments can be made so that they can keep their job. So RSB as a whole, though, started under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, under the Rehab Services Administration. So some states actually put blind services under vocational rehab. Missouri is one of the few states that has separated it out completely. So let's say, for example, someone is deaf, blind. They would actually have a case with Missouri Voc Rehab and Rehab Services for the Blind. So Missouri Voc Rehab would handle the deafness or hearing loss, and we would deal with the vision loss. RSV covers from first diagnosis all the way down to end of life. So if someone is born blind, we can start then. It starts with children's services, and we follow them all the way up through school. If they're homeschooled, we still help navigate services that would be on an IEP. We kind of help the parents do that. When the child either expresses an interest in working after high school or going to college, that's where my position comes in. Vocational rehab comes into play. We work with them from the age that they're legally able to work. So that might be helping them get summer jobs, internships, learning how to write resumes, learning how to do interviews, pick out clothing, that type of stuff. If they want to go to college, we have a college sponsorship program that is very generous. It covers tuition, fees, textbooks, room and board. And we assist with transportation if they are in a situation where they need to, maybe they are from Maryville, but they want to go to school in St. Louis. Obviously, we're not doing day-to-day transportation, but when they go and come back for breaks, we'll assist with that. They do have to maintain a 2.0, and they have to be full-time. And again, that covers from undergrad up to grad. So I actually have a couple of clients who are attorneys. So we pay from undergrad all the way through law school. And the other programs that we have, so job development falls under vocational rehab. We also have independent living, which those people who they finish high school, but they're under the age of 55. Either they cannot work for some reason outside of vision loss. We don't consider vision loss a reason why you cannot work. But maybe it's not appropriate due to either other disabilities or they really do not want to work. We still will go in and provide some services. We'll provide activities of daily living skills. So that's like your cooking, your cleaning, your grooming, some hobbies. We have some stuff up here which will kind of get and make that a little bit clearer. Medication management, that type of stuff. And orientation and mobility, which is what Ben here does. So teaching them how to travel independently, whether that be with a cane, helping their family members learn how to do sighted guide, so that when you are doing sighted guide, you're not dragging the person or making them fall or tripping yourself. Learning how to navigate stairs and that kind of thing. And then over 55, again, if they're not interested in employment or, they've gotten to a point, they're retired, or there's too many other medical issues, it's older blind services at that point. So we do not, age is not a reason not to do vocational rehab. My oldest client was 93 and self-employed. And actually did not lose her vision until she was 91. And so, yes, she successfully closed out, meaning that she was able to keep her business going and got to a point it required her to learn how to email. She did not know how to do an email before we started working with her. But now every now and again, she'll send me an email. I need my calendar. We give out these large print calendars.
I didn't break it.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that this morning. I said, man, I left the large print calendar.
I gave a bunch away yesterday.
Yeah. Or she'll contact me and say, I need help with my magnifier, So she'll, shoot me a little email or something, and she's so tickled that now she knows how to do that. And she knows how to use QuickBooks and stuff like that. So we set her up with a rehab engineer, which is a person who goes out and works with them on technology. So teaching them how to use the computer, deciding what software makes the most sense, whether it's Zoom Text, JAWS, or NVDA. I think Ben is going to touch on that a little bit. And if they need to use Braille, teaching them kind of the beginning of Braille. Not all blind people use Braille. So, yeah. Hopefully that answered the question about how we got started and why we're here.
So and thank you very much. That was exceptionally helpful. Our agency, like Linda was saying, voc rehab in a lot of states, they many of them will handle this disability, this visual impairment, right? So, but the one thing that too came about, the reason why we were split up, right? This is such a unique disability. It just is. When I'm working with employers all the time, and I'm working with my MoBR counterparts, my weirdos over there, so what tends to happen is we start talking about all these different impairments, or like there's mental illness, there's autistic, there's just there's an amalgam of things that can happen going on. So when it gets to someone like me, and I'm talking about visual impairments in the workplace, you can almost hear a pin drop. Just like that. The employers are just, they're so afraid. They don't know what to do. Like, oh my gosh, am I have to pay for this technology? Or, how do I interact with individuals with visual impairments? Like, what do I do? And part of that is because, individuals with visual impairments, where you don't see us very often, no pun intended, right? I don't have an eye for that joke. Ben's got better ones. He'll tell you a few. He's got good ones. So, the thing about it is also, though, when you have a visual impairment, sometimes you're afraid to go outside. You're afraid to interact with folks. Especially in the very beginning of visual loss. Right? So a lot of individuals tend to not be, ironically, as visible, right? So you really don't see individuals with visual impairments very often. Especially, let's say you're in a small town in Missouri, right? So in a rural community. I've been to a lot of small towns where I'm working with specific employers, and it's just like people who live in South Texas. They've never seen snow. It's like, I've never really seen someone with a visual impairment or someone who's blind. What do I do, right? I was at a Dollar General, and I got someone hired on over there, and I was working with their iPad, their register, right? And the general manager flat out told me, there's no way that we're going to be able to hire a cashier with a strong visual impairment. I was like, well, wait a minute, give me a month to work on it. We'll see if we can change that. And I don't blame her, right? Because you guys I'm sure every one of you spend $1 here at Dollar General. Those folks do a lot of work. They're not just running the register. They're doing inventory. You got theft. You're stocking shelves. You're facing shelves, right? So there's a lot of work to it. But if I have the right client, and my VR counselors, they've got all this education tools that they've really brought to the client, and they've come to me as a job developer, and we're all working together as a team, and this is the right fit. Well, we're gonna do it, right? We're gonna push the envelope. But that's what makes this kind of hard, right? You guys probably all know several folks who probably have some form of autism, or I have like 5 or 6 people I've known in my life who have Asperger's. Right? Really intelligent people. One of them is an accountant in Chicago. Dude can't tie shoes, man, but he makes $150,000 a year. I don't know. But blindness is just one of those unique disabilities, really. So that's why we're kind of split up from Missouri VR, right? They're underneath DESE. And we're underneath the Department of Social Services. So some of our policies and procedures are a little bit different. Overall, though, we fall underneath RSA, like Linda was kind of talking about, right? So that helps to guide our case management. That guides how we're working with our clients, our action services, our case notes, the procedures, right? That kind of stuff. And then WIOA, right? So some of you, Hannah, and a few others about WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. So that kind of come about, I think 2017, because it used to be WIA. And so it's added a few things in there. We all fall underneath WIOA, right? And so when you're talking about employing people, you have to abide by certain policies and procedures with WIA. Right? So that's kind of where we fall. So that gives you a good idea of RSP. Now, in your area, right here in Maryville, Linda, she's the individual, Linda Johnson's the individual that covers this area as a VR counselor, right? So she's going to be your go-to. She's going to be reaching out to you guys, too, your teams, right? But that's we have counselors that cover all parts of the state, right? And then our job development team covers everywhere. So Ben over here is in our Southwest office, right? So I had to lure him away out of our region to get him to come up here. So I had to sign some stuff with my deputy director. Don't worry about that. So Ben does all the O&M cool stuff, like the stuff I like admire. I'm like, brings a lot of technology where he goes, and you know, today, right? Everything is in where? The palm of your hand. You know, way back when, people would, you know, just even 10 years ago, they'd have a little wagon that they pull behind them with visual impairments, people with visual impairments. They have all their stuff. You know, they're pulling it everywhere, right? So, you know, I have a visual impairment, obviously. I went to college. I had a few of those devices too. I have to lug those things around sometimes, you know, so I can see, right? So, but today, there's a lot we have in the palm of our hand that makes it a lot easier for individuals to integrate, right, to their environments. Okay? But it's also kind of cool because you all are using the same technology. What's interesting is before, there was a lot of technology that individuals with visual impairments were using that people who were sighted weren't. Today, that's not necessarily the case because you're operating through the same medium, phones. Now there's stuff out there, of course, right? And I've got some of that displayed over here. But in general, we're kind of coming together with the technology piece. So Ben does a lot of the, his job is to really provide O&M, right? So, but he does it through a lot of cane training. He's very audible, you know, you're using your ears and your senses and that kind of thing, and then he has the technology piece. So Ben, I'm going to turn this over to you because, you know, you're the dude over here.
I'll start this off by saying a lot of my clients say, "Oh, how long have you been blind?" And I tell them, 30 years, and they say, "Oh, well, I guess it's a long time since until I learn how to travel well." And then I tell them about how, even up till kind of around 2007, when I graduated high school, I was still bumping into poles, and I couldn't tell if it was the pole that was shaking or me. I definitely was on the inside. And humans are like 80% water, so they say, well, something was definitely jostling a lot. I basically didn't become very good at the cane until I got actual, training at the Louisiana Center for the Blind, where I went, a residential training center that I was, well, my dad helped me out a lot at the time, but we were able to convince the New Jersey Commission for the Blind, where I grew up, to pay for me to go to this much, at least at the time anyway, a much better training center in Louisiana. So there I got some really focused training, not to say that you can't obtain that otherwise through itinerant teachers like what I am now, but it's definitely much easier to become a real competent traveler if you can be at a residential center that requires blindfolds throughout training. I had no sight at the time, so that was, the sleep shades, as we called them, were irrelevant for me, but relevant for everybody who had some sight, minus some very rare exceptions, like maybe certain students with autism or hearing loss, but most of them were too. A lot of the students with hearing loss in that state would go to the Louisiana School for the Deaf, I think, which is a really funny abbreviation, LSD. Anyway, a good school. I did visit there once, but anyway, we didn't have a whole lot of deafblind students there. But so basically, everyone would wear sleep shades, and that's where I really learned that now I'm kind of overly analytical, some people say. So I didn't quite buy into all the philosophy of 100% about how, blindness is no more of a characteristic than your physical height. Not everybody. You weren't forced to guzzle that down, but it was in the air. It was very, 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 very progressive as far as blindness goes. But regardless of where the students were in their philosophy, you were definitely propelled forward to, embrace your blindness and be more competent with doing things non-visually. So that was a very great experience. Then I went back to my home state and went to Montclair State University, and I got my undergrad in English, and I was looking for something a bit more hands-on afterwards. So I ended up going back to Ruston, Louisiana for a year and a quarter for the master's degree program to get certified in teaching orientation and mobility. But they had a whole master's degree program there as well as an apprenticeship program, and yeah, basically those two prongs. But I went all out basically. Then afterwards, I still hadn't had a job, which was kind of, well, Jeff could probably talk about that, but I was one of those stats of people. I was 26 at the time and I still didn't have a job. It's like, oh snap, I better take care of this really soon. So I applied to a training center in Virginia that I did not get into, and Rehab Services for the Blind Southwest District Office, which did work out. So I didn't really want to go as far as Hawaii, even though that sounded appealing, but I had a pretty wide net, and so that paid off pretty well. So I've been here since the beginning of 2015 almost, like February, whatever. I did my first lesson on my birthday, April Fool's Day of 2015. So I had a nice long adjustment period, which I very much appreciate. That was helpful for sure. About 2 months really. So a lot of my clients they just want training for how to, go up and down stairs. That's a biggie. Curves. Some people want to do street crossings. I would say that might be less than 25%. I'm sure it is actually. It's a little bit of a bummer, but in my view, but I definitely, if you look at it on the bright side, I've probably helped some people live longer from, by delaying any inevitable, falls where people may break their hip or something legit tragic like that. That leads to a domino effect. So at the bare minimum, I can help people stay upright. But when it comes to more exciting things, I help people become more comfortable with their vision loss, my sense of humor is slightly nerdy, I guess. I'll tell people that your cane can give you back your depth perception 100%, as long as it's in the length of your cane, You really do get better depth perception that way than with your crappy eyesight. Honestly, people, sometimes I'll separate things out into different processes. Like if you're crossing the street, aside from using proper cane technique, you want to mainly focus on 3 things: placement, alignment, and timing. Are you starting at the right spot? Are you facing the right way? And are you going at the right time? And you could expand on those, but especially in the timing factor, because that depends all on what kind of intersection it is. But it's like, somebody has a lot of remaining vision and they don't want to use sleep shades, I'll tell them, it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you might be okay with your sight for lining up properly, but you sure as heck don't want to rely on it for determining when to cross. You better be learning to use your ears for that,
Mm-hmm.
So things like that. It's a lot of back and forth with me and the clients. I try to get them to decide what they want to do. One of the most frustrating things, I talked about that for a second, is when people don't know what they want to accomplish. That happens a fair amount. I haven't really thought about it with age demographics. It might be younger people primarily, but it's not just that. But a lot of people don't really know what they want to do, which is annoying. So we just start out with cane technique, and I offer street crossings or, the bus if they're in Springfield. Springfield's got a really good bus system, I think. Best anywhere in a 100-mile radius, as far as I can tell. Well, I'm not sure actually, but what help?
That's probably, yeah.
Yeah, about 100 miles. Yeah.
A lot of rural area too.
That's kind of the smattering there. Any questions? I do a little better with the Q&A format, but
Ask him away, like he's a genius. Like, go hit him,
Do you go to your clients and practice, do you practice kind of on their turf? Do you have them come to you? How do you?
Most of the time I go to them. I did, there was a woman in a city called Republic who came to Springfield to work on the south side of Sears, which is of course out of business because she wanted to work on going up and down a curve. So sometimes things seem a little bit goofy, but you just, meet them where they're at. It was a fun lesson anyway. But, most of the time I will go to my clients' homes, at least for the first lesson. And sometimes they'll come downtown Springfield if we want to work on all intersections except for the really busy ones or diverging diamond. Basically anything up to a medium intersection can be found within a half mile of downtown.
Ben, kind of talk to me a little bit, or talk to the team group here about the technology, some of the technology you use, like with your cell phone. One of the things I know when I went with Ben, I kind of shadowed him when I first came on. We were talking earlier, we went on a 2.5 mile jaunt, so we were gallivanting around, right? So, but he was listening to his phone. He had a couple different apps. We had an address, and then he was able to hear it, kind of the tone of where that address was based on where he was born.
Yeah.
So talk about it.
So I do use technology a lot, but when I'm, it's kind of a constant ebb and flow. I mean, I like technology a lot when I'm not actually in motion. When I am in motion, I kind of want it, less is more. I don't want it constantly blabbing in my ears because then I can't focus. I have a huge emphasis on mental mapping. So some of that is gathering data beforehand. I do like tactile graphics a lot. Like on paper, there's a lot of ways to get maps and things on paper. I'm sorry, I didn't bring any of that with me, unfortunately. As far as refreshable tactile graphics, pins coming out of the tablet, that's mostly a future thing. And as far as devices that state agencies can buy for clients, that is it's a non-thing right now. But hopefully in the next few years it will exist. We're still in the 20th century as far as that goes. Thanks in large part to the indifference on big tech companies, or by big tech companies, including Prospero, Humanware, all those folks. But they're finally starting to care about it. So I'm a little bitter, but I'm glad they're starting to care about that. Anyway, so I would say the best way to learn is through, gosh, what are they called? I get confused between kinesthetic and proprioception, but oh well. Basically, learning through traveling is the most effective way for most people. Then I would say, at least for me anyway, tactile graphics is kind of a distant second, and then going another great distance to the third place would be verbal description. Verbal is going to work better for some people than others. For me, what they call it, attenuation is really high. Like by the time it goes from your mouth to my brain, I've already lost like what the heck you're talking about. So everybody's different with that, but with the technology can kind of check a couple of those boxes in different ways. One of the cool things, let me see if I can get this up here. I'm gonna disconnect my Bluetooth headphones here and turn speaking rate down a little bit here. 60%. I'm gonna go to an app called Soundscape. That's it. It's a free app from Microsoft. This is the one I was using when Jeff and I went to OTC. The story he told.
It's a really, really warm day.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to search for Home Sweet Home, I guess, for Central Square in Springfield. Okay, let's see here. I'll search for the work address. I'm just searching for 149 Park Central Square. And let's see if it picks this up here. Okay, great. So they pull that up, and there's a thing that says Start Audio Beacon. This is a free app from Microsoft, but it's only available on the iPhone. I wish it was available on Android. They do have a couple of cool programs also, but this is not on Android at the moment. There are I'm not as familiar with all the Android options. I'm a little familiar with some of them, but there was a great cross-platform app called Nearby Explorer from the American Printing House for the Blind that was pulled from the App Store and the Play Store. Not that it had anything to do with this really, but it honestly it didn't, but I don't think it did. But it was exactly around the time of the 2020 election. It was Gonzo from the App Store, which is a real bummer. That was the best GPS app of all time. Now I literally bought a $1,500 GPS device because Nearby Explorer doesn't exist. That's how good it was. So also kind of bitter about that. But anyway, the next best thing is Seeing AI. Oh, well, no, that's a different. That's Microsoft too. I get confused. Sorry. Soundscape is the GPS app from Microsoft, which is the next best thing in my view.
Does she ever annoy you because she talks so fast?
Once in a while, mainly when I'm trying to multitask, which is, they say women are better at it, which I couldn't tell you. It's probably true, but I don't think any humans are really as good as, I mean, I think only a computer with multiple cores can actually multitask, right? But anyway, men are the worst, that's for sure.
I'm a disaster.
Okay, so let me see here. Okay, so there's this beacon, what's what they call it, on the square in Springfield. So I hit the button to try to unmute beacon. I'm not sure why it's not speaking. Just to give it a demo here. Unmuted beacon, there it is. Okay, so there is a slight noise that it makes when I'm pointed. Okay, so this got two voices. There's the voiceover, which is the system, you know, the accessibility on the iPhone itself, and the app-specific voice. Let me slow that one down too.
Set grade, set feed, grade, check audio, share, grade, set feed, sounds, settings. Channels, language, voice, additional, speaking rate, speak, 90%, 15%, 60%, back up, set back up, beacon on 140, Thomas Weston, answer call, message, answer call,
Now you gotta wait for this call to pass through. I can mute it, but I can't actually like deny it, so it just takes time. But I do have this cool thing, set this feature ready to go. I know what direction Springfield is, assuming the compass works here. I think it's like that way, basically. Yep. Okay. Go away. Okay, there we go. So it said Jones Student Union, bike parking. It's just, the app does a bunch of stuff. It's, okay, so right as I'm pointed here, it starts to make noise. It's louder. Then I feel a little boom in my hand as I go back and forth. There's this, as if I'm shorelining a scene with my cane, you know, at the bottom of the driveway, edge of the street, that line. That's kind of what it feels like as I go back and forth. It's a little tap that the phones, as of, gosh, I don't know, about four years ago or something like that, they can do. Anyway, as I go more to the left, it starts to fade away. So it's that to, I don't know what that is, 45-degree sector or something like that.
Is that identifying a curve? Is that what it's doing?
No, it doesn't do that at all. It's just GPS based. There's no camera functionality in this app.
So what are you getting with that tone?
The direction of the place that I'm tracking, which is downtown Springfield.
Okay.
So and the little tab. If anyone wants to feel this,
My screen
just
curtain
a
on.
second.
Screen curtain on. Jump student speech off.
Okay, so the voiceover speech is stopped now, but just the app speech will be going. If anyone wants to feel what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like high tech but easy interface, and I think the ease of that interface is what's needed more.
Yeah.
Sorely.
Just a little blip. Yeah.
Yeah. can pass that around, that's fine. This is like my favorite app. It is free. The only people who lose out, which is sad, is the people with Android. But that's Microsoft's problem. This is a Microsoft app for
So I
the
lose out on it. Tis I.
Sorry, Jeff.
I know, me too, me
So
too.
someone can use that app for.
I use it for determining the street that I'm walking on as well as intersecting streets, and it will specify whether the intersecting street is to the left or right or both.
Oh, great.
So that's cool.
It gives you street names.
Oh, cool. Yeah, street names for sure. Like right now, if I'm, there's a
Speech
button.
on my location. Button.
Yeah, let's hit that, my location.
My location. Facing southwest. At Northwest Missouri State University.
And if I hit the next button, do the next button,
At
it shows.
Northwest Missouri State University.
You can also get stereo information if you have headphones, like I do. I know people are worried about cooties, I don't blame you. But anyway, I'll hit the next button, the where am I?
Einstein Brothers vehicles about 160 feet. Burn Hall, 475 feet. Jones Student Union, 65 feet. Melon 48, 285 feet.
So basically, if you have headphones on, it'll do left or right, and the forward and back it's going to be limited if you only have two speakers, right? I mean, the stereo effect, whatever, is kind of limited compared to whatever the heck they call the surround sound stuff nowadays. If you had more than two speakers, or more than one on either side, whatever, more than three total, you could, or at least three, I guess. It would be better for determined, because sometimes some point is behind me, but when I turn left, it starts going to my left. So then I know that it was behind me, not in front of me. If it's centered in front of you or behind you, you really can't tell the difference unless you rotate and then get some perspective. So you do have to do that, but that's just the limitation of stereo.
At
They
Northwest Missouri State University.
could add like a,
Jones Student Union.
let me turn this down. Some of the graphing programs with audio representations of graphs, which I hate, but it helps some people. I think tactile graphics is better. Well, it definitely is better for most people who have fingers. Seriously, but anyway, sometimes they'll use like a hiss. They'll add a hiss to the audio tone if it's below the x-axis, and I think that's cool. It's definitely a good use of resources. But I think Soundscape should add that too. So if it's anywhere from, I don't know, 301 to 559 in your virtual clock, that there to all the way like there, you'd hear a hiss along with the speech. Maybe I should suggest that to them. Yeah, I probably will. Anyway,
So it's like a depth, it's adding depth to a flat soundscape, sort of,
yeah,
dimensionality to it.
yeah.
So Ben, you'd use that like if you're walking on city sidewalks, it'll take you to an address or tell you what stores are coming up, or what is it? Is that what you use it for?
For sure, yeah. It's
Okay.
pretty good with bus stops, but actually, what I like to do when I'm really needing verification is to use what they call optical character recognition. They have some, also known as OCR. It's been around for a while, but it didn't become something that nearly everybody knows till more recently. But anyway,
What's that?
this here. So I have a favorite app called SuperSense, and there is a free Microsoft app as well called Seeing AI that anybody working in RSP probably knows about, but if you don't, it's fine. But it's very popular. I think SuperSense is a little better if you don't have any usable vision, because with what's it called? Seeing AI, you have to aim your phone almost perfectly. Well,
Yes.
The threshold is very high if you want it to speak back. SuperSense, as well as this, now it's a free app called Envision, which is cross-platform. That one's cool, Jeff. You may want to.
I know, I've been messing around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, SuperSense and Envision are both really good with giving you gibberish. If gibberish is what's in the camera, gibberish is what you get. But that's a good thing, because you can sort of problem solve until you're aiming it to where you get better results. So that they're much better with that. Anyway, quick read. That's what I'm. So I'm just going to point this around here. Let's see if I get anything.
Capital B. Capital W. 7. Win.
That's okay.
Pause. Capital E. TH. Star. Star. FSRR. STRR. Straw. Sure. Sure. STRR. FSTRR. Stop. 7 star.
STRR.
Star. A. STR. 1 star. I star.
No,
Capital D. Is. NR.
I'm not getting the
S.
most
A. N.
helpful
S.
results
Missouri
yet.
Judge. Rehab.
Oh.
7. 4. 70. Re. Capital
Missouri
D.
Rehab.
ST. Rapsol. 4. 0. CX. Missouri TMTS Software SR Rehabilitating. Missouri Rehabilitation Services. 4. BND. ENA. EO.
Missouri Rehabilitation Services for the Blind, I guess. It did not say that, but I'm just kind of guessing that. Like pit archaeology, you know, for OCR archaeology.
Capital S. Reps. Services. 4. Down. Missouri 10 says CK.
Not sure where that's coming from, but
Services. 3DT. Related.
anyway, so
Services.
keep going.
There's a banner right there, so it read the
Okay,
banner.
okay, thank you.
And interestingly enough, it read the banner at an angle.
Good.
And we've got light coming in there off of that. That's what's really cool about that it's able to at least pick that up.
Yeah, so that's more helpful for identifying the bus stop, for sure, than the GPS, because the GPS data is usually pretty good, but for bus stops, it's really hit or miss. And I assume if a sign, it's more, could be wrong about this, there's certain things that are getting better in the world and certain things that are getting worse and whatever. But for, I think, could be wrong about this, but I think that a visual sign is more quickly going to be updated if it's obsolete than GPS data. So I will very often try to verify something with an app like that.
So Ben, have you ever utilized that application? Let's say you're in a downtown area somewhere, and you're just trying to find a coffee shop or a restaurant or something like that, you know, or in any other specific setting like that where you're kind of on foot besides a bus stop?
Yeah, I use that in the mall quite a bit. Okay. The mall, I should have used that one time. I thought I was going into Best Buy Mobile or something when it was still there. And I asked if that's where I was, and this woman said, "No, sir, you're in Motherhood." So, yeah, I'll use that with the stores sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and just as anyone who tested that app out earlier knows, that little tactile thing it provided was probably the coolest use of just rotation information. Like, okay, so there are a lot of things that would be easier if you had refreshable tactile graphics, as well as an AI filter, you know, I'll just try to keep this brief, but I have played around with one refreshable tactile graphics device, and I basically took a picture of a crosswalk in Springfield, or at least I tried to, and I saved it to the SD card. It's wild that it was able to do that. I had the iPhone, an iPad mini connected to that device, and strangely enough, there was a command on the device to save the image when you're using the HDMI connection. But anyway, I sent that to the head of Orbit Research, who I'm, sort of friends with. He's an extremely friendly guy. We probably talked more than 12 hours on the phone overall now. But anyway, I sent it. I said, "Hey, Venkatesh, will you please let me know how that image looks?" And he said, "I took a great picture of the crosswalk." Well, the funny thing is, it didn't make any tactile sense to me. I'm like, what the hell is this? It doesn't even feel like a crosswalk. So that was pretty sobering for me. That was like in the beginning of 2020, I think, or somewhere around then. It was, I think COVID had already started. But basically, my takeaway from that was, yeah, tactile graphics are awesome, but raw data from 3 dimensions, putting it into 2, you'll be lucky if you can really make true sense of it right off the bat. I think Braille transcribers, or with an emphasis in tactile graphics, are still needed very much. But if you want on the fly refreshable tactile graphics to be a success, I think the technology is ready for that, but a few virtual Legos need to be snapped together. And what they are is basically a camera intake or input, whatever, and an AI filter with a bunch of categories to choose from. So if I could have an icon that would be that would stand for person, and it would always be the same shape, just the position on the display would change, the rotation and the size would change, but the shape would always be the same for that icon. And I'd have a checkbox for vehicles, anything from a unicycle to an 18-wheeler, it would always be the same icon. At least that's what my preference would be, whatever. So you have, you'd know basically through relative, the simpler the interface, the better. And yeah, practice makes perfect, but or progress at least. But I would know that the width of this tablet represents 600 feet and the length represents 400 feet or whatever it is. So you need to have that aspect. But then you'd be able to figure out, okay, so this thing is 2 inches from the left and 2 inches from you know, 6 from the front. So whatever, you know, it's you wouldn't need to know natively that in your head that it's 87.8 feet away. Like, who cares? But basically, you get a pretty good idea. I'd like to be able to, you know, maybe with glasses, taking care of the input factor. I'd like to be able to look off to my left and right and tell whether there are any cars within 1,000 feet, even though that doesn't really matter. In defense of low-tech blind people, all you really need for a crossing is to know, is it safe or not? You don't need to know if there are any cars or trucks within 1,000 feet. You just need to know, am I safe? So I'm not a tech disciple, but I definitely love tech a lot. And that's one area I think it could help quite a bit. Even before we get into 3D tactile graphics, like through a glove interface with an exoskeleton that'll kind of maneuver your hand. And there's like pressure sensors on, or pressure, there's actuators on your fingers and stuff that make you feel like you're feeling a 3D image. Okay, if you want more information, I think the best company that's the most advanced tech on that I'm aware of is from a company called Haptex, and it's just haptx.com. I checked out their stuff in March of 2018, and they've had a few, from what I've read on the blog, a few cool developments in the last almost 5 years, or 4.5+ years. It was not ready for blind people at all at that time, but it's the coolest concept that I've ever heard of. But anyway, even with 2-dimensional tactile graphics, especially with those icons that I mentioned, like an AI, artificial intelligence filter that puts stuff into icon form, and the fewer the better. I would only check the box typically for vehicle and sometimes human, because you know.
So Ben, with that app that you were just kind of describing to us earlier, right? Will it also do facial recognition?
Yeah, or human recognition. Yeah, you can train that. I think that Envision has this a lot, and I think
yes.
SuperSense does. I haven't used it much because I usually go by people's voices.
Yeah.
But yeah, my wife and I are the same age, and I took a picture of her with Microsoft Seeing AI a couple years ago when we were both 34. So it thought that I was like 36 with a smile on my face, and it described my hair and stuff, and it said that she was 21 with a neutral expression. So I don't know, maybe I was still, that may have been before I lost some weight, I don't know. I've always thought that I'm older and everybody else is younger, which is funny. But yeah, you can train this for actual faces too.
Yeah, and I think it just, so one thing I have with us is called a My Eye 2, and I'll show you guys here. We'll have some time where you guys can come in and talk about all the devices we have, but it kind of sits on an arm of a pair of glasses, and it'll actually take several different pictures of someone's face, and then you could actually like speak while it's doing that, and you can give it a name, like, hey, it's Hannah, and it'll tell you like later on, like if it sees her face again at some point, like, and if you turn your glasses towards her and just you're facing her for, you know, a couple, like maybe a couple of seconds, it'll say Hannah, right? So that's kind of where some of this technology is going, right? You know, I love the OCR stuff because even for me, like I I can't read what's on top of that banner. I know it's there, right inherently, unless someone switch it on me. But you know, at like restaurants and stuff like that, like right now, I have to take a picture, you know, and then I'll zoom in and look and see what's on the menu, that kind of thing. But like Orcam and software like InVision, like what I have on my phone, a lot of times I could just kind of point it to it and it'll start reading out.
Yeah, Android has some awesome OCR stuff. Both systems do. I think GPS is a smidge more iPhone centric since the death of Nearby Explorer. Sad, but anyway.
Let's get our hands on some of this
Dude,
stuff. Yeah, let's.
There's
You
a
guys
question
wanna-
in the back.
Oh, can I just show one more cool
We're
thing?
sitting here, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Some of us are coming from the business school, so we're focused a lot on it being employers. All of this, guys in here are gonna be managers one day.
Oh.
So from that perspective, you talk about coordinating with employers. So can you tell us about that? And
Yes.
who pays for that technology, or how they can find people to hire if they're not that visible?
Okay. I like you. I love where you're
We
going.
got like 15
Yes.
potential companies here, Jeff, like in the very early stages.
Okay, this is wonderful. I brought business cards, you know, so let's talk. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely, right. We have a job development unit. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I work in tandem with Linda. She's like my counterpart on the both rehab side. Okay, so when we have a client that she feels and their team feels is ready, they would come see someone like me. Technically, in your area, it's going to be Helen Bishop, right? So what we do is job developers, and this is a young unit. This really we started having a job developer. We had one for a long time. They covered the whole state, but when WIOA really kind of came about in 2017, they started hiring a couple more job developers. Then our unit got created. Basically, it's being created now, right? So what I do is I go reach out to the employers that I feel like my clients would be interested in based on what's on the plan, based on my conversation with Linda, right? Based on our conversations together with our client. And we look at those employers, right? But we also take a look at skill sets, and I got to preface this over and over and over, almost 1,000. We look at skill sets, we look at abilities, we look at talents, we look at the education piece, right? Because our job is dual customer. Right? We want to satisfy the employer, and we want to make sure we're satisfying our client all at the same time. Because the worst thing that could happen is we do all this work, and then the client's only on for 30 days and it just doesn't work out. Then if I go and talk to you as the employer, again, and I say, hey, I'm Jeff with Rehab Services of Blind, remember me? Your thought is, oh yeah, you had us hire this person that didn't work out, right? So you're almost hurting that trust, okay? Now, generally speaking, whether you're sighted or not, or have a visual impairment or not, or you have a disability or not, or whatever, okay? You know, there are people with no visual impairments, no disabilities whatsoever, that job hop, move around all the time, okay? But when it comes to hiring folks with disabilities, when those agencies, a VR program like MoVR or like our agency is working with those employers, right? You can really hurt trust if you put someone in there that isn't a fit. So those managers, those HR folks, you know, they're going to be a little more skittish, and they already are a little bit, okay? So, but what tends to happen is I find clients with those ability skill sets. Now, I go into your place of business, I will perform a task analysis. I will go through each different job, and I've read a lot of job descriptions. So I was a disability claims adjudicator with the Social Security Administration for a little over 2 years. So what someone like me did is I read medical, I looked at history, work history, and then I looked at anything related to mental illness. We determined whether or not someone qualified for Social Security, your Title II, your Title 16 benefits. Okay, so your SSI and SSDI, right? So I looked at job descriptions all the time. Can this person go back to the work that they described? If they can't, because they got a push-pull restriction, right? Or they got to sit stand, or we've got some mental illness, or we've got some, it could be cerebral palsy, it could be anything, right? It could be someone who was injured in an accident. Now they can't sit up for long periods of time. post-traumatic stress disorder, a number of things. So then I would go and look at, there's about 580,000 jobs in the Department of Occupational Titles book. And they each describe those positions to a T. Okay, so there's like probably 45 different janitor positions out there. And then the total in specific areas, in total there's probably over 100, 150. Every job, like how many hours would you stand per day? How much would you walk per day? How much would you sit per day? What the SVP is, which is the strength of the job, how much technical skills you're gonna have to bring to it every day. So then I go back and look at education. Do we have enough education to meet the need of the employer, right? So that's what, when I go in your facility, I learn about you. What are your needs? What are you trying to get done? Who are you trying to add to your teams? How do your teams function, right? Then I go and meet you where you are. So used to, people would say, well, we will hope that the employer is going to meet us where we are. Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way. We have to come find you and meet you where you are, right? Then we bridge gaps. Then we go and we bring back to our clients and to our voc rehab counselors, etc. This is what these employers are looking for today. Okay? And then on your end too, right, you're going to learn through the process of working with someone with a visual impairment. There's going to be things, I've been in employers where after we've all sat around a table, we've thought outside the box, the employer thought of something and said, you know what, now knowing all this information, we can do this because of X, Y, and Z, right? So it's that collaboration piece, it's that working together piece that's usually important. And in today's world, that's the rubber meeting the road, is collaboration. It's not sitting there wondering, right? The destination's the journey piece, right? You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, it's me partnering up with you, us having that feedback back and forth all the time. I have employers that tell me when new technology is arriving to their floors. And I bring that back to my office. They'll send me an email or they'll call me. They'll let me know. Or they'll say, hey, Jeff, can you come out and tour the facility? We got this new, whatever it is. And that's a lot of manufacturing. And that's changing rapidly right now, right? So, really honestly, it's just us knowing who we are to each other and getting to know how we each other operate and what our goals are. And for you as the employer, understanding. That's why we have some of this weirdo stuff here, this technology, and my weirdo people friends, right? So, because our technology is changing too, just like the employers on that side. So the more the employer knows about this technology, the more that the employer can think outside the box. Because I'm not going to know everything about the job. Again, as much as I like to read and research, you as the employer are doing that every day. I'll probably see 20 employers in a week. So it's just that having that good communication back and forth. Honestly, I invite employers to come to our office all the time, right, to get to know who we are. We do presentations a lot. Ben tell you, I take them out a lot. I try to get my whole staff involved, the team, the people around me. It's the interactive piece and understanding each other more than anything. That's how you can be involved and learn more about hiring people with visual impairments. Some of the smartest people I've been around interestingly enough, been people that have some type of disability. I said this story earlier about someone I know who has Asperger's. He struggles to compartmentalize things, and it takes him forever to do stuff. But man, he's just a brilliant math mind, just unbelievable. And so, I'll just say this too. He had a criminal history, had some things going on in his life, some stuff he did when he was younger that he shouldn't have, but regardless. I convinced an employer, this before I ever came here, I convinced an employer in Chicago to hire him, right? Because I talked about how his ability and skill sets were perfect for the work that they were doing. So if I've got the right person for the position, I'm going to push the envelope. My team's going to push the envelope, and we're going to influence you all so that you see the value of what that individual is going to bring to your team. But I'm only going to do that if I know they're going to bring that added value to your team. And I can't know that unless I know who you are and know your business. Does that kind of help?
Well, into the other part of your question about, and I think the important part of your question for the future entrepreneurs in the room, who pays for this?
I forgot about that. Thank you, Linda.
So,
That's it.
that is, it sounds cliche, but it's true. It really is kind of case by case basis. You have employers such as, we have a lot of people with like the IRS. Agencies like the IRS, or when you're dealing with medically based agencies or agencies that have like a lot of proprietary information, they typically do not want us to bring in external equipment. They don't mind us coming in and, sitting down with the client and saying, hey, this client could benefit from a railer, or this client needs JAWS. They will handle the installation of that. They will purchase the device. We would come in and do the training. For your smaller mom and pop businesses, they may not have $1,500 to install JAWS on somebody's computer. In that situation, of course, like Jeff said, we kind of go through, do an assessment and make sure, because this is funded by the taxpayers of Missouri, right? So we want to make sure that, VR is an investment, because, in return, the state of Missouri then now has a new taxpayer. So we want to be responsible with those funds.
Absolutely.
So if it's a smaller business that they really want to keep that person, but they cannot afford that, then we will step in and help out within reason. There are caps in place, but for most, typical needs, it's pretty much covered.
It is.
Some companies like Walmart will do some stuff, but not necessarily all. Like, for example, I have a client at Walmart where they covered a lot of her stuff, but she needed a color identifier so that because she was doing inventory, like something like that, they may ask, well, hey, can you guys get that? Or they may not be familiar enough with it to do that. And in some cases, not as common, the client may purchase the item themselves and we may reimburse the client. That's not a very common situation, but it does come up. Excuse me.
Sometimes the client doesn't realize that we can purchase that. They'll just
Right, and they'll
buy it,
go
and they
out
tell
and
somebody, and it's like,
get it.
oh, dude.
We do not purchase. Now, the important thing to keep in mind, because, like Jeff kind of said in the beginning, blindness is a spectrum. So you do have people who qualify for our services who are driving now. Whether or not they should is an ongoing debate, because you do have to be visually impaired. Like, you have to be significantly visually impaired to qualify for our services. No, not just like I wear contacts. I don't qualify for RSB services. The majority of the staff at RSB is either visually impaired or blind. So I'm, in the minority in that I am fully sighted. But we do not cover things related to driving. So, for example, you may have someone who may ask for a particular type of glasses so that they can drive. There are certain myopic glasses and telescopic glasses that you can use for driving. We don't cover that. We don't cover like specialized tents to help with driving, because for some people it's the glare. We're not going to get into that. We don't purchase vehicles or anything like that.
Pay for fuel, and we pay for a little bit of transportation
Right.
for a couple of weeks before the first payment.
Right, so we'll pay for transportation up until the first paycheck. And then after that, the client needs to be able to. So I know, I can't speak for how all of the VRCs do it, but I will not request funds for transportation until the client has a realistic transportation plan. Because one of the things that we have to keep in mind is public transportation is not consistent in a lot of areas. If they don't have somebody in the household who can drive them, or they don't have another way to get there, that's where like Ben's position comes into place to make sure you can actually get to where you need to get to. Because it doesn't make sense to agree to an hour-long commute that you can't make and you're gonna be there for 2 weeks, and now you've wasted the employer's time and everybody else's time. So we do kind of work with them on making sure those little things are in place.
And I think, like, to that point, Linda, that's a good one. So a lot of what I do, because we do have a lot of clients in rural areas, right?
Yeah.
So today, what we're starting to see is more remote work, right? And that's kind of been sped up due to the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So it is really talking to employers about what type of remote work they have and how that training piece works. So sometimes, I have a client that actually started at H&R Block, and they had to go in for some training, right? And they've had they worked at the IRS down in Austin. And so, but they've come back to Missouri, they worked for H&R Block, they did some training in-house, but then they're remote now, right? And so there's a process for how they're getting tax documents and all this so that they can work remote, which is kind of cool. Going back to something Linda was talking about earlier, regarding what we do for costs and things like that. So I have a client that works at a FedEx facility, very limited vision, probably close to 2,800, and I'll explain that here in a second. But they're scanning items all the time, and so they got a handheld scanner that sits on their wrist. So we had Jedediah come out, and they were able to get the software situated in such a way, we paid for all that it'll read off of there, and it's larger print, right? So we work with FedEx and their engineers because they didn't have that set up that way. So that was like wicked cool, right? So because there's some smart people in the room, and then we'll purchase specific devices for that. Like Linda was saying, if it's within reason, but some jobs require more than others, and some jobs require less. I've got a client that's working for Bayer. They're a plant scientist. They require specific technology for real, like to do their work, right? So we do try to go, as far as we can. But also, again, going back to you guys, it's about knowing you more than anything. Because the more we know about the jobs that are offered, the type of work you do, the type of technology you have, the vision of your company, those kinds of things, who you are, how you work with your teams, that helps us to determine how we're going to assist our client with the employer, right? That's the rubber meeting the road. Bass Pro and I, we have worked on a lot of stuff that they didn't even think they were ever going to work on, right? But it's because I built those relationships over time, and I just continue to look at every specific aspect of their jobs that they have. So now, I have someone who's almost completely blind, who's an educator one at the Warner's Wildlife Facility. Isn't that crazy? Like, it's a spaghetti bowl in there, and that's what they do. They show all these different animals to folks, and they work. That place did a couple million customers in 1 year last year, right? So it's more about getting, you guys are young, you guys are developing, growing what you're going to be moving into, and the companies you're going to lead, right? So just be sure when you do that, you take in equity and inclusion and diversity, and you have that be a big cornerstone of what part of your company and part of your growth model, right? So have good tech people on your teams who are looking at that stuff and their heads on a swivel, right? Because like Ben's talking about a lot of wild stuff. Well, some of it's available now, and some of it's like future, and some of it, there's so much happening today. Technology is rapidly growing. I was at an economic conference a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about this graph of technology over a period of like 1,000 years. And it was kind of slowly going like this, slowly going like this, slowly going. Then right around the Industrial Revolution, it just went. And now it's like pointing straight up. So smartphones, right? The iPhone, mid-2000s, right? And that phone don't even.
2007.
Okay, there you go. 15 years. So much has changed in 15 years. Could you just imagine in 2030, 2037, where we're going to be? I have no idea. right? So, and neither do you guys as employers. You're entrepreneurs. You're learning. You're growing. You're going through business school. You don't know what it's going to look like, but just know that change is the only constant. Right?
And you know, and our staff, I don't just say this because I work for RSP, we're nice people. So I have had HR directors call me, and I'm pretty sure Helen, who is the job development specialist for this area, she's probably had it too. I have had HR directors call and just kind of run a situation past me to say, hey, what do you think we can kind of do here? And we don't mind taking that time out to do that. So if you are, out and you kind of have a candidate that you're looking at and you're like, oh, I just want to know how this is going to play into it, it is perfectly fine to call us and say, hey, here's the situation, here's my concern, because, there are things that you cannot ask in an interview. They get very touchy. And you don't always know who to ask, but the question is still there. So rather than just completely Xing that candidate out, I can't speak for Jeff, but I know I would rather you call and say, hey, Linda, I really want to hire this person, but I'm not really sure if they're going to be able to see the screen, or what if they need 2 monitors, or I would much rather you make that call and give that person a legitimate chance than just saying, oh no, you know what, I don't see how they're going to be able to do it, so we're just going to move on.
Someone did that to me from a call center in Springfield, and they just asked me. They didn't even know if they were a client of ours. They had no idea. They were just curious. They were just curious, and it turned out they were. And that individual hadn't really talked to their voc rehab counselor that they were applying for work at this specific place. So I immediately got in there and looked at their setup. And so we actually purchased some computer monitors, we purchased a few other things, and so they started as a sales rep, and so now they're in an escalation department because they're good at what they do. But that's because of someone, an HR professional, just gave us a call, and they were like, wait a minute. I don't know what to do, but they just looked us up and found out that we probably would. So heck of a quick. Honestly, that's a better point than I think a lot of what we've kind of talked about. Like, it's all that reaching out, right? If you don't know, let's go find someone to tell us. That's all I ever do, because I'm not that smart. I just find people to know.
We got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's go through some
Let's get
stuff.
some hands-on stuff.
Yeah, come on up. Just imagine each of you are standing next to me in a parking lot, and there's 2 stop signs. One's at 20 feet, the other one's way down there at 200 feet, right? So the way that you see that stop sign way down there at 200 feet is how I see the stop sign at 20 feet, right?
Oh, okay.
So it just makes everything so much smaller.
Right.
So this is actually, I'll turn this on. This is a talking scale. So let's.
Can I check that out?
Yeah, Ben.
Oh, I know what scale. I think
40 grams,
And then we can actually turn it to.
1.5 ounces.
There you go. So I used to teach folks with these scales all the time. Or they'll use it to measure, like when they're cooking and stuff like that. So there's that. We got measuring cups. We've got measuring spoons.
Oh yeah, I was showing her someone asked about the cutting board.
Oh,
it's high
that's a good
contrast.
one.
So for a lot of our clients, either with the color blindness or there's issues with like glare, this helps because it's black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So the contrast helps them be able to tell, one, what side they're on and what they want to use it for. So that helps with that. And it's a little bit larger and thicker than a traditional cutting board.
And they actually have cutting boards that have it's like a screw or whatever, and it's got a knife on it, and the knife the end of the knife spins on this screw. So like when I would teach people how to cut, like on something like this, right? So the knife kind of just it doesn't come off. So you have all your vegetables here, and you just cut.
It's like a guide.
Cut, right?
So it stays on the board?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And also I teach people to cut like this. You take your knife, cut. And if you ever, I always fingers behind the knuckles, right? You don't want that being part of the food you're making.
Just good shoes.
This is a pen friend. I want you guys to feel this. This is cool. So this has got little dots with it. Okay. So this you can hang. Oh, you've even got one of those. I've got a green lanyard now. Right? So yeah, let's go. So I just press a button. I hold it to. I take one of these dots off. Let's say I want to put it on this eyeball right here. Right. I want to see it. So I put a dot on it, and I say, Rehab Services for the Blind Eyeball. And I just press the button. Right. So then anytime it sees that. It sees one of these on there, it'll pick it up, and you just press it, it'll tell you what it is. I have helped people organize their pantry. We've even got clothing tags that I've used on this, and I've pinned them up to like lapels and stuff like that. And so that way people kind of know. I was at Whiteman Air Force Base, except that I used the way arounds. Anyway, so the way arounds are like kind of a step up from the pen friend. And you can use your smartphone for that. But this individual works at a supply shack for next to the B2 bomber. So, but we actually put these way around tags on everything. And so they take their phone, it scans it, it tells them where it is. So if someone on base needs something, they know they can get in their inventory online and go search for it, right? But at the same time, they know that they can walk out to the actual supply area and they want to order about everything, right? Tons of stuff. They can go and find it and grab that and then get it requisitioned, whatever it is they need to do, and they get it off to that department, and then they take it out of inventory, right? So I remember when I first talked to the employer about it, they're like, this is impossible because it's a big supply shack. It's like in a big facility. But we used the way around to do it, and they were just blown away, right? So again, like Linda's saying, like you got to justify it to what the client is really trying to get done, right? But it is perfect to showcase this stuff to employers and to educators and to anybody that's going to be involved with working with clients early on, right? That way you guys know, because you guys are in college, man. Like you're going to come out of college, you guys are going to be in positions of leadership. You're going to be in positions where you're directing teams, or you're in areas of growth in your businesses and companies and people who you're working for, right? You're going to come across someone with visual impairment. You're like, wait a minute, that weirdo Jeff dude said something one day about something. I don't know, man, but I need help. All right, and you're going to have an idea. Or Linda said something that really made sense to you, and you're going to remember that down the line, right? So this equipment is that's what's unique about it. I use this a lot. I put it on can items and stuff like that, like everything. These are kind of cool because I think they're like $500 or $600 or something like that. So once it gets fired up here, yeah, all right, it's already fired up. So
And a lot of clients like those because they're able to write. They can see like sign stuff with that. And
yeah. You can change the color.
Man, you can even see the menu at the restaurant. That's so good.
For real, like honestly.
Yeah. I forget my glasses and I'm like, hey, you can tell me what's in here.
A lot of times I'll use my phone, like I'll take a picture of it and then I'll zoom in. Like last night at the Mexican restaurant, that's what I did. Or if I'm like really far away, like